What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Coffee and Karim podcast. This episode has been brought to you by kjovian.com. If you want to check out our merch, you can get a discount at the description below. Coffee mugs, shirts, all that stuff. And if you are a constant viewer and listener, you get a discount. So be sure to check out the description box at the YouTube video. Today, I am with Axel and Alec. What's up, guys?
Hi, how's it going?
How you doing, man?
Thank you for having us. I'm excited to be here. And I wanted to say, that I'm just happy to be here.
Hey, man.
And,
I'm glad you're here too, man.
Exciting.
Yeah, I remember. Let's start talking about it and just jump right into it. You are one of the original starters of podcasts, because I remember you had your own podcast show way before it was popular. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was back in 2006. But podcasting thing's been around since 2004 or 2005, around that time frame, and I was working in the entertainment business at the time, and I was like, let me see if I could find some type of like radio or something like that, and I was like, maybe there's some type of internet radio going on. So I Google searched, and I found something called podcasting, and the name came from because iPods were popular back then, and then you're casting the radio signal or whatever, so that's where the name came from, podcasting. So I was like, oh man, this seems cool, maybe this is something I could get into. And so I started doing research, and you had to do RSS feeds and things like that, and at the time I had a podcast show called Grill the Wire Radio.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous doing it, because I was like, what am I going to do? Just talk? I was like, I need, other people to feed off of the energy. So then I got, other people like Victor and Drake. And I was like, well, it'll be like an entertainment type of thing. And so that's what we're doing. We did about 47 or 48 episodes. And you were actually on one of them. And,
yeah.
And you know what? I think that was in 2007 or something
Wow.
like that.
Yeah, really? Damn.
I actually was talking to a friend of mine, and she was asking me, about you. I was like, yeah, Karim, he's like 25 years old right now, probably.
Mhm.
It's like, and but yeah, it was. Time goes by so quickly.
It does. I remember that show that we were on, and we were on the contest, and me and my brother were like, we were so hyped. We were like excited because it was our very first contest.
That's right.
It was live on the radio, and we won, which was really cool. And we got that iPod. So thank you for that.
No, you're welcome. Of course. And iPods were in back then. I mean, I know
They
now
were.
they're like, oh, what's an iPod? What's
No,
but yeah,
they
that
were.
was like a hot item back then.
It was.
That was. Yeah, I remember that. I was actually going to bring the episode and play it, but I didn't have enough time to find it. All the episodes are taken down now, but so if someone tried looking, they wouldn't find it. But
Yeah, if you find it, let us know. We'll
I'll
put a little
definitely-
snippet of it on there.
all right, so I'll do that. I'll definitely
Yeah.
look for it.
Yeah, and then we were so nervous too, because you have that radio voice, so it's like, dude, this is professional as fuck. So we're like, I don't know if we this is like legit. We're gonna look like fools if we get this wrong and stuff. So we were really nervous on that.
Well,
show.
the great thing about that story is, like, now I feel like it's come full circle. You were on my podcast, and now
Yeah.
I'm on your podcast.
It's crazy how things work, right?
Yes, that's what I was telling my brother. I was like, I can't believe that this has come full circle. This is like so surreal. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's and who knew podcasting would come as far as it's gone. Not everyone knows about podcasting, and I think it's a great thing. And that was actually one of the reasons why I think I started looking into radio, because people were always saying like, oh, Axel, you have a great voice for radio. You should do radio. You should radio. But it was so hard to break into it. So I was like, there has to be another way. Maybe there's something with the internet, and that's why I started doing the research. And then I found out about podcasting. I was just reading everything about it, and and then I did it for I think about 2 years, and then I was leaving the entertainment industry, and then I went to do a different type of industry, which I am now. And so that's why I stopped. That was like 12 years ago or something like that. And I mean, I tell you, time goes by so quickly.
It does, yeah, it does.
And so, yeah, so that's where I am now. But also the other thing was, in between that time, I was like, oh man, I should because I was still working in the entertainment business, and I was like, I wanted to, break into the industry, and it's so hard, it's very competitive, and I was like, what's a good way of doing it? And people were telling me, oh, why don't you do like a short film or something like that? And I was like, okay, I could do that. Now, mind you, this was different, but times have changed. They're a lot different. The technology is just like a lot easier to consume than it was back then.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you started you started before everyone, man. You were like really jumping on this stuff before anyone.
I know. I know. It's kind of weird. Like I didn't even think, even because there's another topic I want to get into, which was so it's like, okay, I'm gonna do some little short film or something like that. So I started writing it down, and I'm into supernatural things. I was like, all right, maybe I'm into vampires, and so I was like, I don't know, something. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer just ended, so there was that that vacancy of stories like that. And so then I came up with this idea. I was like, what if I explored like death and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so then I came up with this short feature called Death Hunter. And as I was writing, I was like, man, this is getting really good. I want to, keep adding to it. And it kept on growing and growing until it became a full script. And one of my friends at the time, who's an actor, he's a bi-coastal actor. He travels through California and New York doing stuff. And he came to me and said, you should take this script and bring it to LA and pitch it. And I was like, oh, wow, I never, thought about doing it, but all right. And so at the time, there was a movie that came out called Saw. And this, one of the way they pitched this movie, because back then they would pitch it just by giving the script, and they would tell you, like, okay, so, you're in like this factory and these guys are chained. And so you would explain this to producers or whatever, the networks. But what Saw did, they actually shot like a trailer for it, and they pitched it. So this helped because then they could visually see the tone and what you're talking about. And you know how a trailer is, when you see it, you're like, I want to see more. Mm-hmm. So that's how they pitched the Saw movie. So I said, let me do the same thing for Death Hunter. So I shot a trailer with a production company, and it came out really good. I lost it. I don't know where the trailer is now, but it was a really nice trailer. And so I took that with me, and this is how much things have changed. It was a VHS. It was a VHS. And so I have this awesome trailer of Death Hunter, these cool shots. And we went to LA. I pitched it to 2 production houses. They were both interested in it, but they one said, because when I wrote Death Hunter, I was writing it more like a series. Mm-hmm. And they both said, the people that were interested, they're like, yeah, we want this script, we're interested, but we're interested as a feature. And I was like, oh, okay, because I didn't really write it as a feature. Then I had to condense the story and everything. So I was like, okay, so let me start rewriting it as a more condensed story, so I could fit a feature. So I'm writing it, and I'm like, man, there's just so much story. It's hard to like condense it into 2 hours, because when you write a script, generally it's a page a minute. So if you have, if you have a 120 page, then it's about 120 minute, film. Uh-huh. So I was like, man, there's no way I could condense this into 120 minutes, which is 2 hours. So I was like, maybe I can make it as like a trilogy or something like that. So I started going that route, but then I found out if I sell it to them, they would then they could manipulate it any way they want, and I would have to be okay with that. Who are you? We bought the script from you. We could do whatever we want with it. Yeah. And I didn't for those people who are writers, like when you write something, it's like you're a baby, so you're like, it's like here you go, and then so I didn't like that they would have control over whatever they wanted to do with it. So then I was like, well, maybe I should do like a series, but like a short series or something like that. And I was like, maybe like I don't know, like a web series or something. And this was, I don't know when this was. This might have been 2007 maybe, or something like that. and then I was like, who, so then I started, but I started writing a different series from the feature. The feature is a totally different story than this web series that I started writing. And because I was telling a few of my actor friends and a director in LA, I was like, can I just use the same script, to write this? Because it'd be a lot easier because I already have, all the characters. Like, no, probably better if you do something, with the same name, but it's totally different, like different cast, different, story and everything. I was like, all right. So then I started thinking about it. I was like, all right, so instead of the lead being a male, it'll be, female. And
it was McKenzie, her name was, right?
Yes, McKenzie. And then I was like, okay, so I started to write the script, the web series, which back then, YouTube also was different because, back then when I started YouTube, which I'm sure you remember, like it was like 5 minutes you could upload on YouTube. Now
That's
it's like infinity.
It was like a limit to what you could upload.
Yeah, they're like only 5 minutes, and then they eventually increased it to 10, and then 15 minutes, and it was on 15 for a while, and then finally, it broke where you could just put however long you wanted. So when I was writing this, I was like, okay, I just have to keep it 5 minutes or less. Keep it very short. And so, as I said earlier, like it's a page a minute. So I was like, all right, I only have to write 5 pages. Boom, there you go. And so I wrote the first episode. I was so excited. I was like, all right, this is great. Now I just need to find out who wants to be in it, who I can get. And so, I started, casting people, and then you were one of the people that was casted on there.
I was excited about that. It was really cool, man, and I got to play the bad guy. And it was exciting. I wish we were able to finish it because it was really fun. It was really cool.
Well, I mean, we could. I mean, like the way I look at it, that was like season 1, and now season 2, we could do that.
12 years later.
12 years. You know what? And here's another thing. If people Google the series Death Hunter, those episodes, because there's 5 of them, those episodes were actually shot a year apart, and you wouldn't even know. Because of my brilliant editing. You would never know. You think it was shot consecutively. And yeah, I found a way to make it work, and it worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the series, and but I wouldn't mind if you would want to do a second season.
I'm down, man.
All right, so you heard that, everyone.
That would be so cool. I mean, I don't know if you ever like played the video game Devil May Cry. It kind of reminds me of that whole vibe. And that's why I was really interested in it. So, like, you guys were, like, both into entertainment? Like, you guys both, like, came up into that? Or how did it go?
No, he was in the entertainment industry. I just like watching movies. I mean, that's as far as much entertainment I ever delved into.
That's cool, man. So, like, I guess you're, like, the only one that was really going towards the entertainment and...
Yeah, I mean...
So what got you into it?
Like, that's a good question. Well, I was in high school... And at the time, they had a program called the Mentor-Mentee program, and this was
co-op, right? It was co-op program.
Yeah, and then that was I think the second program. So I did 2 programs, where one program was the Mentor-Mentee program. I think that was 11th grade, and then 12th grade was the co-op program. And so the Mentor-Mentee program, my mentor was one of the executive producers from Guiding Light, which used to be on CBS Channel 2. And we would talk about, production and things like that. And he said, you should shoot a documentary about something. I was like, okay, great. So I was like, well, all right, I could do a documentary about my school. Because he was into documentaries. I wasn't really into documentary, but I was like, all right, I guess I could, get into it. So I did a documentary, like a 10-minute documentary about my school, about how long it's been around, and why it has gargoyles. It was Flushing High School. That was the high school, and so that was when I was in 11th grade, and then in 12th grade I did the co-op program where you would work 1 week and go to school the week after, and I went to different places, different production houses to try to get work. Here I am, a high school kid. I was 17, or 18, 17 or 18, and then finally one production house, thank God, hired me. He's like, you know what, I like you, I'm gonna hire you. And I was so desperate because the program said if you don't get hired within the next week, then you're gonna have to go back to high school. So I was like, man, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. So I put everything creative that I did in a big folder, and I took it on the next interview, and that was the one that hired me. I remember I made paper bag puppets. I brought that in, like, look at all these puppets. I made like 50 or like 30 different puppets, and then all these other different drawings I had and stuff. So I was really like pitching it. I was like, yeah, see, I'm a great worker. And then he's like, yeah, you seem like a great person. I'm gonna hire you. So like, oh, fantastic. But also, I was 17 or 18 years old at the time, and like I went to one production house, one channel. I'm not going to name what it was, and I got there like 2 hours late because I don't know, the numbers in Manhattan could sometimes be kind of confusing if you go beyond like uptown. Like the numbers were matching up. I was like, I don't know, so I got there 2 hours late, and of course they're like, oh, they interviewed me, but I didn't get the job.
That sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks.
That happened to a few networks. I'm not going to name what they are, but yeah. So I was fortunate to work at that production house that did hire me, and so they liked the way I worked so much they hired me after when I graduated high school, and so I started there as a PA, as a production assistant, and I worked my way up as a production manager, years later, and then. During that time, I started working there in 1996 or 1997. Things were changing. As the new millennium approached.
Mm-hmm.
Back then VHS was the in thing. You had high 8.
It was the highest quality.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think it was like 1999. You had mini DV, which is like these little like VH cassette. Recorded digitally.
Camcorders.
Yeah. And so I was just seeing like how things were changing. So I'm always been the type of person to keep up with the times and always exploring what's new out there, and so I always try to. But it's hard, especially now, because it just seems like there's always something new coming out. All the time.
I mean that's what I was going to ask you. Like I don't know how you're able to keep up with it, because now it's like imagine Axel like at 17 at this age.
Oh my
God.
God.
Things are moving so fast. It's like the next year the newest thing is out. Then and like in a few months the newest thing is out. So, how were you able to keep up with all of that?
That's a good question. My dad, he used to work for a newspaper called El Diario. I don't know if it's around anymore or not, but it was a Spanish newspaper, and he would always buy. I guess I got it from him. He'd always buy like the latest electronics. Like he bought like a Mac computer. I don't know, in 1987. It was like $5,000, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was like. I didn't really do much. It didn't have that much gigs. I mean, it had like probably like a few, maybe it had 500 megabytes. Yeah, so like that was like a big thing back then. Like, oh my God. So I said to my dad, I always been a very acquisitive person. I said, he was showing me this like new thing. It was like by iOmega. I don't even know if they're around anymore. And you could hold like, I don't know, like 50 megabytes, something like that. It's like, say, look at this, son. This is the future. But and then I was like, but Dad, aren't they going to, I was like, Dad, that's great. So we could have this forever and ever, because then we could store stuff. He's like, no, because then next year they'll come out with something new that's maybe now 60 megabytes, and the old one's is 50.
Yeah.
So I was like, then why even buy it then if it keeps on, upgrading like that? He's like, that's just the way it is, son. That's just the way it is. So I guess him saying that, it planted in my head. I was like, okay, so things just are constantly, in flux, and they're constantly changing. So you can never get used to or comfortable, because things are always, advancing. So, and that was probably like, I don't know how old I was. Maybe I was like 8 years old at that time. So like it's funny how those things stay in your head. And so I guess the Axel today would probably be the same way. I would just be like, okay, this is great for right now, but what's happening in the future? Like right now, I'm looking into 5G. 5G.
5K or 5G? Oh yeah, 5G. That's right.
Yeah. Because right now we're currently in LTE, also known as 4G, which just basically means generation, 4. So now we're hitting into generation 5, which is coming in 2020, 2021. Verizon's already pushing a soft rollout of it, and the thing about 5G is autonomous vehicles, which will also roll out probably in 2020. you could probably call an Uber, and an autonomous Uber car will come and pick you up, and then it'll take you to your destination.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the signal with 4G, there's dead spots. So with 5G, they would plant these antennas on every light post, so you would constantly have a strong signal. So I'm predicting that that's a game changer, because if you have a strong signal that you never have to worry about having a dead signal ever, and you could download a movie within, 5 seconds, like a 4K movie, 5 seconds, boom.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be crazy.
That's gonna be a game changer, because one of the things, that's stopping, like let's say someone wants to create a network, is things like that. You're like, I'm not going to have enough bandwidth for someone to download my video, so that's going to change it. I'm predicting that anyone can then create their own internet network, because now you have nothing stopping you. And so that's what I'm predicting right now, based on what my research, because that's another thing I love. I love to do like a lot of research about different things and trying to stay with technology. So that's where I definitely see things going. So a lot of new industries are going to open up and be created starting 2020 or 2021, once when 5G fully comes out. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited about that right now. And probably other things that we can't even imagine, like Apple and Samsung are delving more into augmented reality. So imagine if you have 5G and then you have augmented reality, which is, for those people that don't know, it's just you're seeing the reality. Then if you had glasses, you could then see things that added onto the reality.
Yeah.
So imagine having you could be watching your podcast as you're walking, because supposedly Apple's going to drop Apple glasses. I don't know if they're going to call it some type of glasses either this year or next year.
Wait,
so
Google Glass? I think that.
No, yeah, there's Google Glass, but Apple's coming out with their own version. So
gotcha.
I'm sure it's going to look very sleek, very in style and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool,
Yeah.
because Google Glass kind of didn't take off.
Well, I mean, look the way
Yeah.
it didn't look that attractive. Like you had like
Yeah.
this thing protruding, and it's like, hey man, I had this like a clear thing here, and then it was like it had like these band here, and it had no lens there. It's like
Yeah.
you look like.
It looks
It looked
weird,
like Generation 1. It looked like a beta. It didn't look like
that's true.
complete.
It
And
looked
who
like
wants
a
to wear a
prototype.
beta on? I'm like, all right, guys, I'm wearing
They
a
were
beta.
probably just in a rush. They just
Yeah,
wanted to
like
push
we got to
out
roll it out.
a
Just
bit.
roll it out. Roll it out. It's
Yeah.
like, and when it comes like that, when you want to capture the zeitgeist, you really want to, test the product out, which I feel like that's what Apple does best. Like they let other people roll it out, and then they take it and make it better. They take it to a whole other level.
Yeah.
Again, my dad was a big Apple user, so I'm also a big.
Yeah, I'm a big
user.
Apple user too. I just converted like many years ago.
Now we're talking.
People
I'm
have-
like-
most people have.
Yeah, it just makes things so much easier, and,
Yeah.
and the way everything connects with each other with your laptop and your computer and all
Yeah,
that.
it stay in
Yeah.
the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Of course, and that's very smart. Like if they keep you in the ecosystem, they keep you buying their products, which is
Exactly.
smart. And also, I'm hearing that Apple now wants to delve more into software than hardware. So that's also interesting. So maybe they see that's where things are going, especially with augmented reality and 5G that's coming. So I'm very excited to see what happens.
I don't know if you saw this. I wish I could show it to you. There was like just yesterday I was watching it. It was like a conference of them showing off the new. I think it was Samsung. Like it was like a new VR. It's completely high quality and it's done so well. And they did it in a way where you are watching the person use it, and everything's popping up in front of them like holograms.
Yeah.
So you're like the third person viewer is seeing what they're seeing, but in a 3D space.
And that's what augmented reality type of thing.
Yeah, so it's like an augmented reality thing with holograms. So they're using the headset, and then like they're pinching. They have the app, so that they'll like, oh, let me take this app, put it right here, and then they pinch it to make it grow. It's kind of like Iron Man.
Yeah.
And they were
Yeah.
showing how everything works, and then they popped up like a holographic piano, and they started playing with it. And then when you put your hands out, it registers your hand and every intricate movement of your hands. So
That's awesome.
So it's like it's like so advanced.
So with 5G rolling out, then
Yeah.
you can have that, not even worry about that being there will be no downtime.
Yeah.
It'll be a thing of the past. People, the new generations will be like, downtime, what's that? It's like,
Yeah.
like
That is
and you can
crazy.
tell them like, well,
I mean, it's good for us because
Oh,
once
yeah,
we
absolutely.
upload stuff and download
yes,
stuff,
yes,
it'll be like
it'll be
a
so
breeze.
quick, like done. It's already
Yeah.
done. It's already up.
That would be amazing.
That's what I'm saying. It's going to change everything. So I'm very excited about that. I mean, right now they already rolled out trucks. I think they did that either last year or this year, where they're autonomous. They're driving right now in the United States autonomous. I mean, they have some truck driver somewhere, and he's like he takes control over it once when they get into like the cities and stuff. But when it's in the regular highway, it's all autonomously, which is great. I mean, because I just see that's where things are going. You know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially with like Tesla and Elon Musk really pushing for his cars and stuff. So, what do you think? Where do you think
we
that's
were
going to
actually
go?
talking about
Yeah.
what we were talking about Elon Musk. I remember on the way over here we were talking
About the what we were just talking about right now with the autonomy, with the
autonomous cars.
well, the autonomous cars, but also like the virtual reality.
Yeah.
What was he speaking about also? He was talking about something about like tapping into like your, like what Steve Jobs was talking about, like psychedelics almost, like DMP and people who take acid, you tap into like a certain part of your brain that is basically like dormant. And people that do use psychedelics, I mean, they have like spoke about like outer body experiences and I don't know, reaching a part of your brain that you're not able to activate without using any one of those treatments, whether it be DMP or acid or mushrooms or peyote, which is pretty much the same thing as mushrooms.
Well,
I mean, like,
but the whole 5G thing is interesting too. But there's always a flip side to
what's
the
the flip
coin.
side?
I mean, I've also heard that because of the heavy concentration of like the 5G of like the I guess radiation,
the radiation,
or the radio signal.
Yeah.
It interferes with certain things in nature. Like I heard there were like flocks of birds that were dying. I'd have to look exactly into it like to find out, but I know there was somebody like trying to stop the 5G towers from going up.
I think that's why they've been taking a while now. I think they should have been out for some time now. That's what I think too.
well, it
I've
also
heard.
takes time. They're changing the whole network. It takes time to put this system in place because again, there's going to be a bunch of antennas on each light post.
Right, that's a lot of power that you're now emanating. You know,
Yeah.
Think about all these cell phone towers that people didn't want in their backyards anyway because they were talking about like their kids were getting sick or animals were getting sick, and now you're saying that you're going to put an antenna that outputs even more energy, and you're going to confine them to even smaller spaces, like you said, on different traffic lights and lampposts. There has to be a downside.
You know, when it comes to technology, you know, I feel like something like this, so they'll figure it out as they go along. But of course, there could be some dangerous side effects that could happen. But I mean, we won't really know until
we
it's
try
in place.
it.
I mean, I know what my brother's
Collateral
saying.
damage is acceptable. Is that what you're saying? Like, yeah.
What I'm
if
trying,
we lose some people, it's okay.
Yeah, it's for the greater good.
It's for the greater good.
What I'm trying. Hey, look,
But we won't know unless we try.
He's like,
I mean, yes, they should do, obviously tests, see, if it's, safe for, society. But yeah, they might be pushing this system really quick because I think what the United States is they're nervous about other countries rolling out 5G before we do. I mean, and we're a country that always has to be, first. We always we're
America.
number one, America, number one. So that's what it is. And if people, get sick, so be it. We'll figure it out. Don't worry. Just roll it out.
Yeah.
So that's what I feel like that they might be doing. I mean, I'm not condoning that that's the way, but I mean, but it does kind of feel like maybe that's what they're doing. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're still doing tests even right now, but we'll see, what happens. But what I do know is, regardless, they're rolling out and they want it out by 2020, 2021. Actually, the government even said that they were going to roll out 5G if the network, if these phone companies didn't move fast enough because they were like dragging their feet. 5G, because we have to change the whole system. It's like someone coming to your house and saying, if you don't, renovate this house, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So that's why the cell phone companies are trying to move faster now because they don't want competition. Because if the government creates their own 5G, of course it'll be a lot cheaper. They'll be like, we'll do it for $10. You guys are paying how much for internet? $60.
I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, exactly. That's why. So that's why the phone company's like, oh my God, we gotta start cracking on this. Like, don't worry, we got this. We're gonna roll it out by 2020, 2021. So that's why there's this speed now going where maybe if they weren't dragging the feet, maybe it would have already been out yet, 5G.
I gotcha. So what about going along that, since we brought up Elon Musk, where do you think like space travels? Like where do you think the destination or the direction of that is going to be for you? Like, do you think it's? I mean, there's a lot of money being put into it. Do you
Right.
think it's a waste, or do you think it's actually
Well, you know, like
something that we need? What do you think?
I think it's a waste.
Yeah.
Well, first you have to ask yourself. I remember I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was on a podcast, and he wasn't debating. He was preaching to this person, pontificating, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what he was saying was that the reason why we stopped, why we didn't go to the moon, or why we haven't traveled to the moon since 1972 is because there was a big race between us and the Russians during the Cold War as to who was going to get there first. And since we got there first, that's the reason why we stopped going.
Mm.
So you really have to ask yourself, like, do you believe that we actually been to the moon?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
a big question.
Do you believe, honestly?
Myself, in my
Yeah.
opinion,
From 1969 and 1972, we had, I think, 6 missions that we landed on the moon. Do you believe any one of them took place?
it's so hard to believe, to be honest with you. I mean, I believe it, but it's just so hard to convince me. Like, I would like to believe it, but it's so hard to be convinced of it because we haven't done it since,
Correct.
you know?
Right.
And we have more technology now, and it's like, it's
Absolutely.
still kind of hard.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
It's a hard pill to swallow, so
Yeah.
to speak.
it does make you wonder. It's like,
Yeah,
Oh.
it makes sense, though.
But you know, I just heard that NASA is now working on a new space station, smaller than the International Space Station.
Mhm.
That's another thing. When did the International Space Station go up? Like, was that like in the 2000s or the 90s? How come there was no documented footage?
Mm.
It just one day we had an International Space Station and there was no footage when it went up.
Mhm.
There was no footage while it was getting put together. I mean, we have pictures of people bouncing around in polo shirts and cargo pants up there, you know, and they look through this fish-eyed lens, you know, window
Yeah.
down at what we're told is Earth. But when did that thing actually go up? There's so much like disinformation and misinformation. It's hard for me to believe anything that as far as like space travel and NASA.
Mhm.
I mean, it was Operation Paperclip. It was started by the Nazis. It was a Nazi who ran NASA in the beginning, like and yeah, they
Right,
came over
right,
from
right.
they came over from it was Operation Paperclip. If you look it up, it's pretty interesting stuff. I forgot his name. I think his name is like
Von Braun?
yeah, Von Braun or something,
I mean, I think-
something Warren Von Braun. And he was brought over, and you know everybody was doing it. The U.S. brought over German scientists, and the Russians took a bunch of German scientists, and basically because the Germans were far advanced with their technology. I don't know where they got their technology from.
Mhm.
I guess we'll never know. But yeah, Operation Paperclip NASA was created by a bunch of Nazis.
So do you think SpaceX is going to succeed? Like, I've been hearing a lot of people saying that, you know, because there's this thing like just 2 people, like they're not named yet, they're going to be flown to the moon, very first people. I think it's going to happen in 2020, where Elon Musk is going to send out 2 people. They paid for it to the moon, and they're going to come back, and people are like, if
Well,
that
you know-
happens, that's going to be bad for NASA. NASA doesn't want to.
No, of course. I mean, they have to be first because they've been around for so long. But the other thing that always interested me was, you know, SpaceX was talking about, we're going to go to Mars. You know, we're going to have a mission to Mars. We're going to, you know, start a colony there or whatever. And I was always saying to myself, wouldn't you want to first colonize the moon before you do Mars? Mars is further away. So if something happens, it would take you even longer to get back to Earth. You should have like you know, a stopping point, which would be the moon. You know, so build, you know, a station there,
Yeah.
and then I mean, to me, that made
It
you know,
makes
made
absolute
logical sense. Like,
sense,
why
yeah.
are we going all the way out there? It's like saying we're going to go to, I don't know, something like Australia, but we're not going to have, you know, like nothing
Yeah.
in between. You know, so to me, it's just safer to, and then plus, if you could work out all the kinks on the moon, so that this way, when you go to Mars, you know what you're doing. You know.
Do you believe there's like a colony on the moon already?
I mean, who knows? Anything's possible. If there's a colony, you know, in the moon.
What do they call it? The dark side of the moon? It's
The
like,
dark, you know,
Yeah.
that's another. I was telling my
Yeah.
brother that that this January, China has their own, NASA, and they launched a rover, and it landed on the dark side of the moon.
Allegedly.
And so I'm looking at the footage. And I was like, "Oh, isn't that interesting? How they launched this rover instead of it going on the side of the moon that we could actually visually see. It's on the opposite side that we can never see, which is the dark side of the moon, because we only see one, side of the moon, not the dark side of the moon, because the moon doesn't rotate like the Earth does.
Yeah.
So I was like, how convenient, that is that they. I mean, you could Google, the footage and you could see it. But I just thought that was interesting. So you can't really, if you have a telescope. I mean, if you had a strong enough telescope, maybe you could see, something, there. But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. Like, oh, of course, it's the dark side of the moon. Fascinating. That's it.
Yeah.
Supposedly, we can't even get to the moon because they talk about the Van Allen radiation belt, which is like this radiation belt like outside of like the Earth's atmosphere that is so strong that it would kill anybody that goes through it.
Yeah.
So if this Van Allen radiation belt actually exists, then how did the astronauts that went in 69, 68, 70, 71, and 72 get through? And there was an astronaut being interviewed from NASA. I forget his name. You could look it up, though. Sorry for not getting his name, being ill-prepared. But they asked him, like, how, if you today were to go through the Van Allen radiation belt, when you went through the Van Allen radiation belt, like, what were some of the side effects? He's like, well, we didn't know we were going through it, so it didn't really affect us. So wait a minute. So you're telling me that because you didn't know that there was this, like, heavy radiation field that you were going through, because you didn't know that you were getting affected, that nothing happened to you? But now you're saying that this Van Allen radiation belt does exist, and if people go through it, they would die? That makes no sense whatsoever. So basically, you contradicted yourself, and you basically explained that, or you basically admitted that you never went through it. So, I don't know.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's like I've watched some videos and done some research on it, and I feel like that's also like a topic that a lot of flat earthers bring up, that we cannot go beyond the
Firmament?
Van Allen, the firmament, all of that. So there's no way that this sphere is really what our world is. So what do you guys think about flat Earth, like flat earthers and all that?
Well, I mean, I think, it's something that, when I first heard it, flat Earth.
They make some good points. I'm not gonna lie.
Do.
They make some really good points.
They do make. When I first heard it, but I was a coworker. She told me about. Hey, Axel, have you heard about the flat Earth? This was like 2 years ago, and I was like, that just. She's like, isn't that funny how people still think that the Earth is flat? And I was like, yeah, that's, ridiculous. And I didn't even like look into it or think about it, and then fast forward, sometime last year, I was like looking into how scientists are saying that, that reality might be, soul might be like a computer system, some type of virtual reality and stuff like that. And then I was like thinking to myself, I was like, well, if this is like, and of course scientists are hypothesizing, this is a theory, like just like the Big Bang is a theory. So they're hypothesizing that this could all be, a computer system that we're in, like in a virtual world. This might not
Like
be
a simulation.
real. Like a simulation, like the Matrix, yeah. So then I was thinking, I was like, well, if this was like the Matrix or something like that, I was thinking in my head, I was like, well, if I was going to create something, I'd probably like create like a flat land, and then put these pieces here and stuff like that. And then I remembered what this coworker said 2 years ago about flat Earth. I was like, let me look into this flat Earth, because now I was looking into this virtual, reality that the world, this universe may not even exist or whatever. This all might be like a Matrix or something. So I was like, let me look into this flat Earth, because maybe there might be something to it. So then I started Googling flat Earth. I went on YouTube and I watched a video by Eric DeBay and ODD TV. And I was like, they make some very compelling, interesting points. And I was like, I always had an open mind, like, just because I don't feel like, I feel like as a person, you should always keep growing and exploring life, and don't just be stunted from, at a certain point in your life. You should always keep growing as a person. So as I started looking into it, my views started to be more open to, maybe this might be a plain, system rather than a spherical one.
Yeah, I mean that it's interesting. What do you think?
I think you have to. I try to approach things. I try to be very impartial. But I try to always approach things with a logical standpoint. So you have to ask yourself, do you believe natural science or applied science? So basically, what natural science is, as opposed to formal science, is natural science is something that can be observed, something that can be measured, something that can be tested, and something that can be repeatable. So that's natural science. If you ask yourself, do I believe in natural science? Then yes, because most things can be observed, most things can be touched and tested, and most things can be repeated. So you need those four things. Formal science is theorizing. It's mathematical equations. So if you believe that the answer to that equation is that complex theory that you've concocted, then of course you're going to believe your own theory. But is it repeatable?
Mm-hmm.
Is it testable? Is it observable?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no. So things like gravity. Gravity cannot be observed. Gravity cannot be measured. Gravity cannot really be tested, and gravity cannot be repeatably tested.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I have an issue with. As far as like flat Earth, there are some interesting points that a lot of flat earthers make. Then there's some things that are questionable. Like for instance, what is it? The viewing point, right? Where
The vanishing
the
point.
vanishing point, right? Where if a ship is basically sailing away on the horizon, you can
Mhm.
only see it as far as you can view it with your own human eye, right? But
Mhm.
if you have a super lens camera, you can keep viewing it.
Mm.
That should be almost impossible if there's a curvature to the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe that, what is something else? Like if you were to take a camera, there's the curvature to the Earth should be about I think 15 or 12 miles. There should be a curvature to the Earth. If you, 45,000 miles in diameter. That's the geocentric model that we're led to believe in, as opposed to the heliocentric model, which is what the flat earthers believe in. There should be a curvature. So if you're taking a picture of the horizon,
Mhm.
right, and you take it from, let's say, 15, 20 miles, 25 miles out, it should not be flat.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some type of curvature. So you have to explain that. And as far as like water always levels. No matter what you put it in, it always
Mhm.
finds its level.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that if on the geocentric model, if there's a globe? How
They would say gravity's keeping it together. Gravity, man.
Right,
So it's
so-
like that.
so then I would say, explain to me gravity. Well, Sir Isaac Newton, he invented gravity, and no, that's a theory. That's a theory. It's an interesting theory, but it's a theory.
Hmm.
Why? Because it's not supported by natural science or applied science. It is formal science. So when I try to approach things like that, it brings a lot of questions that there are no definitive answers.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no definitive answers, right? So if something is the truth, there is only one truth, right? What we've always heard, there's three sides to the truth, right? There's his, there's hers, and then there's the real truth.
Yeah.
But there always is one truth. So if there is a theory, then that's not really the truth, right? It's kind of like you're kind of like just guessing,
Mhm.
or you're hypothesizing. You're trying to figure out like maybe this is what the answer is, or the answer should be this, but that's not a fact. That's not the truth. So I have a problem with that, and that's where flat earthers, some of the things they bring up are very interesting.
It is. I'm not gonna lie. It is.
And then I was just also telling my brother recently, they found these papers that have been around since 1996 saying that the moon's actually a lot closer, that it might be actually kind of in the Earth's atmosphere or something like that. And I was like, wouldn't the astronauts know that if they went to the moon?
Mm-hmm.
So again, and you could Google that too. That just got released like last week. I think it was last week. So also thought that was fascinating. So now they're saying the moon's a lot closer than what we previously thought.
And now they're saying that the geocentric model isn't a round globe; it is oblate. And I didn't know what oblate was until I looked it up. And oblate is kind of like a pear.
Yeah.
So you're saying that it's not a globe anymore. So why did you show us a globe for so many years, since the 60s, basically, right?
Yeah.
So why
yeah,
was it?
yeah.
Why were we led to believe it's a globe? And okay, so now you discover that it's oblate. So okay, so it's oblate. So does that mean that every planet is oblate as well, or it's just our planet?
No, just
is
Earth.
oblate?
Just Earth is
Right, so
oblique, which is like a pear shape.
There's so many
like a pear shape.
contradictions, and I don't believe in coincidence at all.
Mhm.
So, okay, the United Nations. Did you ever see what the flag of the United Nations looked like?
Yeah, it was like a globe with like.
Right, but it's the heliocentric model.
Oh, if you're looking at it from
It's-
on top, it's spread out.
It's a heliocentric
Yeah.
model. It's not the geocentric model.
That's
So
right.
if it
I remember
was the
talking
United
about that.
Nations, and if this is all these, then why wouldn't you use the geocentric model? Why would you use the heliocentric model?
Mhm.
That's one thing that I always question. And two, like the Antarctica Treaty.
What's
Okay, Antarctica it's not claimed by any one country, right? So, but the United Nations made a treaty where you cannot travel freely in Antarctica. Why? If it's
Ah,
unclaimed,
I didn't know that.
if it's an unclaimed continent, it's not even a country; it's a continent. Then why can't we travel freely? You could take tours there where they'll bring you and you'll see like the penguins and the seals and the glaciers. But as far as like exploring deep into Antarctica, they won't let you.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So that means that if you do believe in that, like, then that kind of like throws everything out of the window in the sense of like parallel universes or other planets out there, because then that kind of just makes it seem like we're the only ones. So what do you think about that? Because I would always think like there's other galaxies, other planets, and there's definitely other beings out there that live, in our universe or another universe traverse out there.
Well, every year we discover tens of thousands of new species of insects and animals just here on our own planet. I think it's less than, 8 to 10% of our oceans have only been explored. That's nuts to me. But yet we've been to the moon and we've traveled to Mars and we've been to like Mercury and Saturn and we've sent probes and satellites everywhere. I lost my signal in the train. I travel in the subway and I lose signal with my 4G phone. It's supposed to be with all these antennas and satellites everywhere. But you're trying to tell me that you could send pictures from Saturn and Mars and wherever else we've sent these satellites to and these rovers? How?
Yeah.
And also the furthest we went down to the core of the Earth was 8 miles. So again, it's another theory about what's in the center of the Earth. That's
Right.
another theory. We've never been beyond 8 miles.
It's cartoons. If you ever look at like when they show us like the center of the Earth, what is it? It's illustrations and
Like
cartoons
lava.
when they show like the core, the center of the Earth. It's this giant liquid magma ball that this is the magnet that makes us revolve around the sun and so on and so forth. It keeps the moon close to us. But have we seen it? No, it's formal science. It's a theory. It's a theory.
And sometimes we get led to believe what's a theory to actually be factual when it's not really factual. It's just a theory. Like me and my brother, we went to the Museum of Natural History,
Oh yeah.
and we went to the
Planetarium.
Planetarium, and we went to see the Big Bang. And as soon as the video started, it said, and now I'm paraphrasing, the Big Bang Theory. And I said, look, Big Bang Theory, meaning like this is what
It's
we
still not
believe.
proven.
But it's not
Right.
factual. It's just
That's
like this
that's
is what
crazy,
we believe.
and that's very true.
Yeah.
And
That's
what
very
is it?
true.
It's all animations.
Yeah.
It's all animations. There's no
Yeah.
live pictures.
That's-
So you get
that's
somebody really cool with a really cool voice like Morgan Freeman. That sounds very believing.
Makes anything.
Now it's believable now. It really-
I love Morgan Freeman. Don't get me wrong, but his voice is so soothing. It's so believing. It's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever he says, yeah, that must be it, of course.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy because it kind of makes you think. It's like, maybe there's like so many different, like maybe things are not so clear cut. Maybe things are in a way where it's like doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. We just don't understand it yet.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and also you want to do your own research. Do critical thinking. Look at both sides of the story and come up with
Exactly.
your own conclusion. Because
Mhm.
everyone's going to come up with their own conclusion. But at least if you look at both sides of the story, then you could come up with your own, opinion and your own idea based off of looking at both sides.
Mhm.
And I think that's the best way to do anything.
So would you consider yourselves flat earthers or in between, or
I don't really like to
label it?
So when you label yourself, like if you're let's say if you're a Mets fan or a Yankees fan, right? You're identifying with one side as opposed to the other.
Mhm.
I consider myself a student of truth, and I try to use critical thinking and deductive reasoning and logic with all the information that's given to me.
That's good, yeah.
But
so
a student of truth is I would pick that if I were to be labeled as anything, because
Okay.
that's just I just want to gather as much truth as possible and shift through like all the BS that's sent our way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm definitely a critical thinker. I just like to look at both sides, and just always staying open and not be so like one-sided.
I forget the name. I think it was like the bananas and the ladder experiment. If you look it up, they got some cool videos on YouTube. I think Stanford, they did it's basically a test where they allowed 5 chimpanzees into a cage, and there was a ladder in the middle of the cage, and hanging from the middle of the cage was a bushel of bananas. And in the cage were sprinklers set up throughout the rest of the cage, but there was no sprinklers on the ladder and underneath the bushel of bananas. So whoever went up to get the bushel of bananas was not touched by the water that was brought down. So eventually one of the chimpanzees went up the ladder, and he grabbed the bushel of the bananas and tried to pull one free. And when he did that, he ignited the sprinkler system. So the other 4 chimpanzees were then doused with cold water or hot water, whatever it was. I think it was cold water. So eventually when he went up there again, the other chimpanzees knew what he was doing, so they started to attack him. They attacked him, they beat him up. So anytime he got close to the ladder, they beat him up.
Ooh.
So then from those original 5, they replaced one. So when they replaced one, they brought in a new one that never seen what was going on, but it was the original 4. So that new chimpanzee, obviously, he went up the ladder, and he took the banana. Now, the original chimpanzee who got beat, who got the banana, jumped in with the rest of the chimpanzees and attacked the new chimpanzee because now he was getting wet. So eventually, they took out the original chimpanzee, number 1, that originally went up the ladder, and they replaced him with a new chimpanzee. So now you have from the second rotation, that chimpanzee who was beat, and basically, with the whole idea, what it was they replaced all the chimpanzees to where it was 5 new chimpanzees, and if any of them got near the ladder, they would attack each other. But they didn't know why they were attacking each other. They just knew if we get close to this ladder, it's bad, so we'll attack each other. And basically what this represents is what we as people come to accept, which is, hey, Karim, why do you do that? Why do you guys follow this routine? Well, I don't know. That's what we all do. We just normally do that. That's what everybody else does. But why do you do it? I don't know. That's what everybody else does. So it's this conditioning that we're led to believe. Don't question anything. Just accept the way it is. Right. This is learned behavior, though. Don't ask any questions. That's not me. I want to ask questions. I want to know why, because I've always been very inquisitive and pensive by nature. So I think we all need to do that instead of just accepting what's told to us, like this is the truth. But we're all intelligent beings. We all can use deductive reasoning and critical thinking, and we could all come to some type of logical understanding of what's being told to us instead of just saying, oh, okay, well, if that's what you're telling me is the truth, then all right, I guess I have to believe it.
Yeah, that's true. I get that. Yeah. I could agree with that, man. So, so we could finally, kind of wind it down. But this is really interesting. So I want to ask a few more. So you guys believe in parallel universes? Because we didn't touch upon that. There's another you out there.
Well, I mean that's possible, certainly. I mean, it's there could be other multi-dimensions.
Aliens.
Yeah, there could be other multi-dimensions. But also there's something called Project Bluebeam that the government supposedly has, where they might fake some type of alien invasion. So, now they can genetically create an alien, and it isn't, look like an alien, but it's something that they created, and then they could, make it seem like we're having some type of alien invasion.
So they could prep us for an actual invasion?
I don't know. I don't know. Or it could just be controlling, another form of just to control society.
Oh, okay.
Reagan talked about that in one of his speeches about we're the next threat is coming from outer space. And I don't know if you remember, but there was something called Star Wars, which was it was a space station that was built I mean, back then in like the 80s, it was like billions of dollars that was thrown into it, but nothing happened with it. But it was this huge space station that we were led to believe where all this money was getting thrown into, and it was called Star Wars. If you look it up, it's crazy. And Ronald Reagan talked about like an alien invasion, and the whole thing is this: to keep people under control, you have to basically keep them in fear of the next threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you always have to make up a new threat. If you look at our history, there's always been some type of fear that's been rammed down our throats, right? Just recently, right? Terrorists, right?
Yeah.
Right? Where it's made most people hate the whole Middle East or anybody that speaks Arabic. For what? Fear mongering, right? And I mean, that's a whole nother topic right there where we could go into like 9/11 and Tower 7 and
No, we could definitely have you guys next
Flight
time
93.
for that.
That's a whole nother topic. But if you just look at like the propaganda that's shoved down our throats, I mean, World War II, like the Japanese, like there was so much propaganda, like they were saying that Japanese people eat your children, and there were concentration camps here in the U.S. where Japanese Americans that were here, that were living in this country, were forced into like concentration camps out in the West Coast. People don't know about that. That's crazy. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, that happened in America. I mean, that's unconstitutional.
And that was our, air quotes, government that allowed that to happen. That's sick.
Yeah, and you guys heard it here, man. Always question things. I'm always like that. I don't really take everything for what it is. I mean, I'll keep it on the side of my brain until I get more information, and then kind of like, just kind of make them connect and see if it makes sense or not. I don't really like to believe things right away,
Yeah.
So that's very important. But
keep
it
an
was,
open mind.
it was awesome having you guys on, and hopefully we could have you guys on again and
Yes,
get
absolutely. Thank
and
you for
get
having us.
deeper.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for coming, and Axel, thank you for like putting me into this world, man. like the podcast world, Comic-Con.
Oh, that's right.
I found out
You
about
went with them to Comic-Con?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I forgot. That's right.
Yeah, I found out about Comic-Con. My very first Comic-Con was through the Gorilla Wire
That's
thing.
right,
I was the gorilla.
Oh, you were the girl?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, it was like I had someone else who was doing who dressed up as the gorilla, and he couldn't make it. And I was like, man, I need someone else. I was like, let me
Yeah.
ask Karim. And Karim, that's another great thing about Karim. He's always like, he's never like, oh no way. He was always like down for whatever, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Anything to help, man. Yeah, it was
And,
fun.
You,
It was
you
lots
were the
of
girl,
fun.
but then you also were
Interviewer after
yeah,
that.
too.
Yeah,
So that was the
I
other
worked
thing
my way
also.
up there.
Yeah.
And then ever since, I have never missed a year of Comic-Con.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I went I think maybe 4 years with you with Gorilla Wire, and then after that I just loved it so much, and I just started going every year after that.
There was one
It's pretty
time,
cool.
I think it was the
That's cool.
second
Yeah.
annual New York Comic Con, that it was me, you, and Victor, and we went there, and I was like, man, I really want, Kareem to, have a good time, really like embrace this. And I remember I got you that statue.
I still have it.
Oh, okay.
Still have that statue.
That was a
man.
cool looking statue.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah,
was
what
like,
was it? With,
I forgot what
it was
it was.
like it was a famous comic book
Yeah, it's
character,
kinda-
but it was also a god. Or
Yeah,
it was
I have
Marvel?
it.
DC?
No, it was like
I think it was Dark Horse.
Dark Horse.
Okay.
Yeah, Dark
Yeah,
Horse.
it was
a
Dark
cool
Horse. He was like
looking-
holding an arrow,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was dope,
was a
man. I really
cool
appreciate that. I
looking,
still have that.
oh,
by
that's
the way.
all- yeah, I bought it. Okay,
it's still in
cool.
the box though. I haven't taken it out. I can't.
collectible.
Yeah, I can't take that out, dude. It was awesome having you. Man.
Likewise,
Thank you guys
likewise.
so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you
Yeah,
for
for sure, man. So definitely have you guys next time. And if there's any socials you want the guys to follow you on, let's just let them know what it is.
My Instagram, Gorilla Wire. That's pretty much
it.
Yeah, pretty much.
At Gorilla Wire
Yeah,
and
just Gorilla Wire.
and Alec.
I'm on Instagram, JAA_11 _11.
All right, sounds good, man. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you for having me.